Hi everyone, it's Leandra at the Kentucky New Vocations Racehorse Adoption Program facility. And today for our Stable Pass behind the scenes video, we're going to talk a little bit about how we make matches between the horses and the adopters. So for those of you who might not be as familiar with our program, first and foremost, anyone who's interested in adopting has to apply to be an adopter. Once you're approved as an adopter, and that process might take a day, it might take a couple weeks, it could take longer. A lot of that just depends on how quickly your references get back to us and how quickly we can validate information. But we take pride in the process. There's a reason that it's a little tough, and that's just something we don't compromise on because we think it directly reflects the quality of the adoptions. We want to have quality adopters because that tends to lead to quality adoptions. So once you're approved as an adopter and you find a horse that interests you, that's kind of one path that we can go by in the whole matching process. So an approved adopter would contact the trainer at the facility where the horse that they're interested in is, and then we can talk about suitability and fit. And sometimes it's a great match. Sometimes you just happen to pick a horse who is great for you and your trainer's on board and that's the one you want and it works out well. A lot of times that just is the beginning of the conversation about the right horse for you as an approved adopter. And if, say we're talking and you might lead the conversation thinking that you're interested in one horse, but we could be talking and say, you know what you're describing really sounds like this other horse who maybe isn't even online yet. So that's another path, and that I like doing that when that's possible because it's a very custom tailored feeling where you are talking to somebody, you're listening to the things that they want or don't want in a horse, and you can you can say this is the one for you based on that. But we have thousands of approved adopters and hundreds of new applications every month, so we have a massive pool to pick from. And so I think there's sometimes a little discrepancy with trying to figure out that system, which is something we're always trying to address. And so hopefully we'll have even better systems soon. But just so you know a little bit about what goes on in our brains, being the trainers, when we're assessing suitability, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So first and foremost, I like to talk to the adopter and see specifically, even though we'll have some information in the application firsthand, what is their value system? So what is priority, whether it be physical or mental. I think everybody kind of has their set values for things they definitely want, things they definitely don't want. So say you definitely can't have a cribber at your facility, then that's on your don't wants. You definitely want a gelding, then that's on your do want. So having the absolute do's and don'ts, and then the kind of nice to have but not necessary, those sort of ranking systems, keeping those in mind. If you're an approved adopter or you're interested in adopting, even if you're a prospective adopter, it's really important to keep that in mind, even just in terms of your suitability for our program and the kind of horses who we have here. So just as a reminder on that, the horses that we have, our niche is the horses who are coming directly from the track or directly from a layup facility, whether it be thoroughbreds or standardbreds, and they're young, they're really young. The average age of the horse who's in our program is 3 or 4 years old, and we consider all of them to be green. So sometimes we'll get a horse who is a little bit older, but they're still probably fresh off the track and they don't have transitional training usually. Unless it's a situation where the horses are returned or sort of isolated situations. But our goal as a program is to help those horses transition who have just had experience on the track and are trying to segue to a new career path. So keeping in mind, all of our horses are green and most of them are very young. That is going to change the value system in general. So if you're wanting a horse with a little more experience, we are less likely to have something that is going to be a really suitable match or ideal match. We're going to be very well equipped if you're looking for a horse to be a project, if you're willing to put in the time and the resources to help that horse complete that transition, because this is really just boot camp for them. We get them so they can stop, steer, walk, trot, canter, and then hopefully add some other skill sets like trail or poles. So basic things, but you really need to be able to have the skill set to complete that journey for them, because the process takes years. A horse will stay on average 45, maybe 60 days, some a little bit longer, some shorter, but that's a very short amount of time. So they're just not going to have complete skill sets. They're just getting that kickstart here. So back to that matching process, we take into account, from a trainer's perspective, the physical and the mental. So physical is pretty clear cut. So you know your goals as a rider. You're likely going to need years to get a horse to the level, even if it's a lower level. It just, because they're green, because they're young, they're still physically and mentally maturing. So they're going to need that time no matter what, even if it's lower level, but taking into account all the steps that need to happen. But ultimately you'll know your goal. And so we'll try to physically match you with a horse who could get to that point with time, with, of course, lots of training and the experience and whatnot, but just taking into consideration their capabilities in the future. The other side of this, which when we have surveyed adopters, many people will say it's the most important thing. Even if you have those underlying values, knowing what you want physically, some of the things that make the most difference in whether or not an adoption happens or whether or not an adoption is successful is the personality factor. So Dudley Square here, who just came yesterday, he's a horse who, having only been here a day, we are able to pick up on personalities pretty quickly. You see a horse just like with a person, you'll get first impressions and they might change a little bit, but we know a horse like Dudley Square here, he's a little more energy, he's really chatty, he's really curious. He's probably going to need somebody who can keep him actively engaged. That's going to be really ideal for him. So when we're talking to an adopter and they're saying that they want something that's really steady Eddie and reliable and something that they can feel safe on, maybe not this type of personality, because we know that this type of personality is a little spunkier, might test the rider more, so it just has to be a different sort of person to appreciate all that Dudley has to offer. So it really comes down to, you could go in a lot of different directions, but the physical and the mental are equally as important. So we really take into consideration those factors. And then I would say there's always kind of an X factor on both the adopter and the horse part, where we have to use our experience and our gut and what it is telling us to see if the person that we know from the application and then through conversation, if they're going to be suitable for the horse. And that might also take into consideration things like the boarding facility where the horse is going to be living, if the horse is really intolerant to heat, maybe not somewhere in the south. So there are so many different things, but ultimately it gets all packaged up and there's a lot of gut reaction and gut instinct that goes into it. And we really do our darndest. Our return rate is quite low for the number of horses who just get adopted through our program in general. And we're really lucky to have the return program that we have to accommodate for those horses who we don't get right on the first try, because just like people, you don't always get your relationship right on the first try, but it's okay, because we have this massive, amazing adopter pool. We're constantly adding to it. I hope that you guys can check out our website, which is newvocations.org. You can see the adopter criteria, and if you're interested, please get approved as an adopter. We'd love to help you walk through this process and really dive into the whole matchmaking as a whole. So thank you so much for tuning into this Stable Pass behind the scenes video this week on how we match adopters and horses.